Hello and welcome today. My name is Michael Harmon. I'm a commercial director here with Ocorian in London. I'm joined today by Ian Rumans and Tracy Newman to discuss the upcoming changes with the proposed Labour budget on the 30th of October. We're 10 weeks out. Both Ian and Tracy combined, I think, over almost 40 years of experience in industry, qualified solicitors, non-practicing, both working with clients from a trustee perspective, being with Ocorian for a number of years. Of course, we've managed to find some time with you today because we don't have the changes just yet. We have an idea of what's coming, but I'm sure you're going to be busy post-budget. It'd be good to know before we sort of get into the nitty-gritty of maybe what's happening and what's to come, where have we come from? How have we got to where we are today? And what do we sort of need to consider from the past before we look forward? Ian, from your perspective, where have we come from?
Thank you for the introduction, reminding us how long we've been in the kind of the industry. Luckily, we haven't been in the industry as long as the concept of domicile, which is going back kind of 200 years. But certainly, that is everything. That is the concept of domicile is everything that Tracy and I have ever kind of known in our space, whether that was on the legal space or whether that is in the trustee space when you're looking at setting up private client structures. And that's all coming to an end. So that's the one certainty, I think, from the announcements that we know is going to happen, is that concept of domicile, which is unique to the UK, is going to go and it's going to change. With that, there will be some major changes to the way that people are taxed for, or perhaps they use trusts going forward. So whilst it is a seismic shift, it also presents a lot of opportunity. And I'm quite excited by the opportunity it presents because there are numerous changes that have occurred over the last 20 years to the system. And quite frankly, the current system is overcomplicated, it is broken, and it just doesn't work, and it confuses clients. So hopefully, yes, we're going to have one big change. Yes, people are going to be upset. But hopefully we will have a system which is easy to understand and, more importantly, is in place and is consistent and isn't changed. Because I think that is one of the biggest bugbears and annoyances for our clients, is that there is always tweaks to tax or their structures. So if we end up with something which is based on a residence test, everybody understands the rules, there is no ambiguity, it's black and white, I think we're actually going to be in a better position, albeit not having the same tax advantages as perhaps the current system has.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's a fantastic way to look at it, that there is definitely going to be positives coming out of the changes from, both our point as trustees in Ocorian, but also for the clients themselves, some certainty around, what's to come post the change. But before we get to that point, Tracy, what do you think, whether it's clients, intermediaries, what do you think that, they need to be doing in preparation leading up to the 30th of October? And perhaps, maybe the changes aren't known from that date, but they may be shortly after that. What work needs to be done engaging with your solicitors or trustees, etc., before we get to that?
The key word is engagement, because that's what's needed at the moment. No one knows exactly what the rules are going to say. We've got some quite detailed guidance as to where they're looking to go. But as with all these changes, there's going to be There's going to be tweaks. There has historically always been tweaks, particularly once they start to work out the true implications of the changes. So really, the key thing, I think, for any individual is to work out where they want to be. Where do they want to live? If they want to stay in the UK, look at how long you've been here now. You need to know when you became resident, when your structures were set up. Are you the settlor? If you're not the settlor, actually, a lot of the proposed changes aren't going to have much impact for you. In fact, they could actually improve your tax position if you're settlor's resident. So there's always a downside, but then there's upsides for others. And I think understanding your personal situation, your plans for the future. And, one of the things you always saw with domicile is, I'm only here while the kids are at school. It was the classic line. And then the kids were at school for, but they're at university now. And then they ended up staying. Now it's going to be much more cliff edge, effectively, because 4 years, your regime's going to change once you've been for 4 years. It's going to change again after 10. And those are going to be the key dates. If you know where you want to be in 3 years' time, and you've only just come to the UK, you can go, okay, well, I'll leave in year 3. I don't want those rules to apply. I don't want to be caught by the inheritance tax net. I'll leave in year 9. It sort of gives you deadlines to determine what you want your future to look like. Now, when you get to that deadline, your position's changed, who knows? But to Ian's point, I would love his optimism that the rules won't have changed and we'll have something stable, but they will have changed. We'll probably have a new government again. And I think that's your key sentiment is, where do you want to be? Where do you actually think your life is? Where are your friends? Where are your children? And those are often the big drivers. I've worked with a number of clients in the past, I'm sure you have, who go, oh, well, I don't like the tax regime. I'm going to go to Monaco. And then they last about 6 months because it's too small or they don't know the right people and there's no life. So they end up moving. So the very trite saying, but everyone always says it, don't let the tax tail wag the dog. It's more about your life. And everything else can follow, but you just need the expertise behind you and the people behind you who can support you in that journey to get you where you need to be.
And as you have those discussions with clients, obviously looking into the future around, whether it's a move, whether it's staying, what the next 3, 5, 10 years looks like for them as you plan backwards, what tools do they need to equip themselves with leading into that change from a more technical standpoint, whether it's reporting, understanding, historical records, what are the sort of exact implementation tools that they need to be well equipped for that change that's coming, whether it's for with a trustee or with the solicitor or anyone.
So I think if you're having a conversation with your trustees, you need to ask them to make sure all their financial records are up to date, because there will be different rules that apply to different periods. So we're going to need to know for those individuals whether they can take advantage of some of the reliefs that are being proposed. Now, that will only apply to certain income if you're the settler of the trust. It won't apply to all the income. It's not actually clear they'll apply to any of the income yet, but they've said it might. So we're optimistic, but that's going to be the key. You've got to have the information in place that's necessary for your advisors to be able to give you something meaningful. We can all give you a very general answer. Even Ian and I, who don't advise, can give you a very general answer on what the potential implications are. But your solicitors and your accountants are going to be the ones who give you the detail. And they're going to need that background data to do that. And that starts with a conversation with your trustees.
I think there are some other things that you need to actually nail down, and that is, when did we arrive in the UK? When did we become residents? Yes, these are also quite kind of pertinent questions. You've got to be honest with the clients and say, what is your likely spending going to be over the next 10 years, and how are we going to fund that? And what are you going to need? What are your requirements as your family grows? Well, because you're going to have a very short period of time to actually consider bringing money into the UK. So it's more about I think the overview of the family plan of where do we want to be, as you said, in 3, 5, 10 years. And subject, yes, there will be kind of changes, and then overlaid on top of that, to your point, there are, which I think is quite good now, there are going to be some clear kind of decisions that need to be made at the 4-year point, at the 10-year point, and it's kind of factoring all of those in, having that conversation, because most of the clients won't really want to get too bogged down in the detail, technical aspects of the yellow or orange Tolly's tax books is not really something that they want to know. They just want to know, right, how is this structure going to be fit for purpose in 10 years in the new regime and support my family? And one of the other conversations that Tracy was touched upon as we're walking down here is really, you might find that where we have one structure at the moment, one trust, we might see that being split into two. So you might have one where the settlor and his wife are totally excluded, and that is almost a dynastic structure. So there's no benefit that's being received. And then the family life style, I suppose, and income generating structure. Yes, there are not going to be the tax benefits that you get from that, but it still will protect against divorcing spouses, creditors, etc.
But also a protection mechanism for you. You know, as much as we hate to admit it, you never know what your children are going to be like. They could be very motivated and determined to make their own path in life. Equally, they could be happy to sit back and rely on the money that's already there. And there's a lot to be said for giving people purpose. So actually, if it's not readily available, if there's some sort of mechanism around it, some guidance around what money will be provided for and that sort of thing, that is a big thing, actually. And it gives a lot of security to the creators of wealth to know that if something happens to them, the money's not going straight to their children who go off and buy Ferraris and Lamborghinis.
Yeah, I mean, it's clear that, whatever is coming in terms of the changes, if there hasn't even been a conversation at this point, then, it's pertinent to almost take that ticket with, whether it's your solicitor, whether it's even with us as a trustee, and begin, preparing for what's to come, because it's almost, the most seismic change that we've seen in this type of regime with regards to the res non-dom piece for, like you said, almost centuries, right? So without having that conversation early, you put yourself at risk that it can be too late. And from more of like a perspective internally with us and our clients, what have we been doing, at least within Ocorian, in terms of our client segments? Have we been putting them into specific areas and understanding them in advance so that we can prepare them for that change?
Well, it comes as no surprise that we've always been looking at the potential for a kind of res non-dom changes. We didn't predict it was going to be as large as a shift as we're seeing at the moment. And every year we run an annual kind of just test to kind of have a look and say, right, if there were some changes on a scale of 1 through to 10, what would it look like? What would affect it? It's part of our own business planning to see what potentially, if Armageddon came, what would it look like, which is important for us. And then all we've really done is we've lifted that up, and Tracy and myself and some of the other team scratched our heads, and we came up with 7 buckets from not affected through to, crikey, there's a lot of work. You're going to be massively affected, that family. And we, as soon as it was announced in March, we wrote out to all our clients saying, look, you would have seen in the headlines, in the news headlines, that there are going to be some changes to the res non-dom. Both parties have said that whatever colour team wins, whether it's red or blue, as it transpires, it was red, there are going to be changes. So we will get back to you. So as more detail has come out, we've been more targeted with our correspondent, depending on our triage system of, yes, we really need to help those individuals. And a lot of it is getting clarity around their thought and vision of where they're going to be, getting the hygiene sorted in terms of what data is likely to be requested by the lawyers, and then I think more importantly, there's only a finite amount of lawyers that are specialists in this subject, and there's going to be a lot of people vying for their attention. So a lot of our clients have already engaged their advisors on this subject to make sure that they're at the front of the queue, because it's not particularly hard to envisage somebody who hasn't been very proactive knocking on the door, middle of February, and I think they're going to be a little bit out of luck in terms of getting some of the lawyers, because I do think there is a tremendous amount of information that is going to have to be digested not just the tax rules I'm talking about. Some of these structures have been around 30, 40 years, to look at the application of the different regime to actually work out what is the best course of action, or what are the 2 or 3 courses of actions that a family may have. So if there's one piece of advice to the client, is speak to the trustees, engage with your advisors, make sure that they're aware that you are going to be looking for kind of advice.
I think it's also important to note in that sort of context that actually, unless you're engaged early, you might miss the opportunity to take advantage of some of the potential reliefs they're proposing to introduce. For example, the temporary repatriation facility. The suggestion is it has to be funds that are previously protected by claiming the remittance basis. Well, if you are a non-dom who's never actively had to claim for whatever reason, because other rules have protected your finances, you might want to make a claim for this year, and you might want to trigger something on which you have to make a claim, so that you can then take advantage of potentially a lower rate in the next year. So you can't leave that to the last minute. If you've suddenly got to generate a dividend, for example, or a significant sale, that can all take time.
Yeah, and that's a really great segue. We've set the scene in terms of where we've been, what needs to happen before the changes occur, what you need to prepare yourself with, the tools and the discussions you need to be having. And then when we get to that point, it may be a few months before, we can get through the weeds of what the actual implications are. What does the future look like for clients? How does that change things for, your clients or even prospective clients into the future for UK and the no longer res non-dom sort of regime? How does that change long term for everyone?
I think it depends, doesn't it? Depends where your client's going to be.
Yeah.
If they leave the UK and manage their day counts, which is very feasible under the temporary on the statutory residence test, no change. So great for them. But I do think, and I think Ian agrees with me on this, that there's going to be a shift away from planning for tax. It's actually going to be much more around asset protection, using the wealth for greater social good. So whether we might see an increase in, for example, not exactly charities, but foundations with a purpose of medical research, supporting various education objectives and those sorts of things. And I do think there will be a greater move towards that sort of area.
I think the other element is very much you're either onshore or you were offshore. And I believe that these changes, people are going to be looking at what is the outcome, what is the goal for the family, and how do we achieve that? And that will be a mix of onshore. We've seen a rise probably in more than any other structure is UK companies being used as family investment companies. We're seeing that there's some quite favourable treatment within the UK. So many of our families who are currently res non-doms, but actually want to invest and they make a huge contribution to the economy, are structuring through UK companies. And that's something that we are gearing up. And Tracy's very much leading on that in terms of our expertise and our size of the private client department in kind of London. We are also going to have to look at traditionally, with I think trustees have shied away a little bit, but we'll be looking at financial products, whether that's insurance wrappers, whether that's insurance for inheritance tax. We've been looking at OICs, so open as a potential solution to kind of some of our kind of families. So it is going to be ultimately we are here, I see, to effectively give time back to the families, to support family offices, to support ultra high net worths. And so effectively we absorb the complexity of having significant wealth. So whether that is your compliance, whether that's a regulatory or tax elements of it, whether that is just providing corporate governance to the structure, that is what we do. And whether or not you have a structure around it or where that structure is, it doesn't really make much difference because the families, whether they're using a trust or they're not using a trust, still need that underlying framework to carry on their everyday life, to preserve their wealth, and in many cases to enhance that.
And I think one of the key things that is still continuing to grow is that regulatory compliance. Won't necessarily be relevant in the context of onshore companies, but with the register of overseas entities, there was a whole requirement of verification. That's now coming to Companies House generally. So where you've got in family investment companies that are UK based, they're also going to have to verify all that information. Now, that is a process. The penalties for doing that wrong are really severe. They can be criminal. So actually, if you've got someone who understands these rules and can help you with that process, that is a big plus for wealthy families.
No, absolutely. And looking into the future now, we've seen, what the important discussions are to have. And it's always, part of our role as trustees to be having those on an ongoing basis anyway. But I think what I'm hearing and, everyone seems to be talking about now, and if they aren't, then, you need to, is don't wait. If there's a call to action for all clients, is just have that conversation as early as you can. Reach out to your professional team, your trustees, your lawyers, and begin that engagement as early as you can. So it's been wonderful to hear from you today and understand, what you're hearing and what you're talking to clients about and where we're going in the next few months and, in the next year particularly. It sounds like there's a lot going on. You guys are going to be busy towards the end of the year and the start of next year, but it's been great to have some time with you. Thank you for joining me today. Thank you again to Tracy and Ian for joining me on the couch. We'll be contacting and reaching out to all of our clients and our intermediaries following obviously this release and all of our content coming out. So please make sure you contact us and have that discussion as early as you can. Our website, as always, reach out to us there, and there will be a QR code on the video if you need to come and contact Ocorian directly. Thank you both for taking the time.
Thank you.